Hi everyone, Fenris Models here, and today we'll be taking a look at... Wait. What is that? Okay, so I thought we'd just do a fun build this week. The core of this kit is the Hasegawa Corsair in 1/72nd scale. Pieces were removed from the sprue and cleaned with a fresh hobby blade. As is the usual, the build began with the cockpit. Each side of the cockpit and the whole seat received a coat of Vallejo Model Air Interior Green 71.010. Model color black 70.950 was used to pick out the instrument panels on either side of the seat as well as the one in front of the pilot. The decals for the instrument panel were soaked in warm water before being slid into place. A coat of microsol was then applied to help the decals conform to the surface. The cockpit could then be closed up in the fuselage halves. You need to be careful here and make sure that it lines up with both sides of the fuselage, but molded inside are little ledges that you can set it on to make sure that it's seated correctly. Before the bottom half of the wings could be attached, there were two holes that needed to be drilled out to allow the drop tank to attach later on. The air intakes were then added before fixing the top of the wings, and then the whole wing subassembly could be attached to the fuselage. Any plastic that squeezed out during this process was trimmed down with the back of a hobby blade. I had to be extra careful here because this Hasegawa kit does have some raised panel lines. The tail stabilizers went on next, followed by the engine, and then the landing gear. And yes, I will actually be displaying this one with landing gear down. Lastly, or at least lastly before we get to painting, the landing gear bay doors. These were a little tricky. While Hasegawa do provide a small ledge for these to sit on, it is very small, and there's not really any bracing to prevent the doors from falling over. Before I could close up the cockpit, I did need to paint one last thing, the headrest. For this I used Model Air Burnt Umber 71.040. The air intakes were then picked out with metal colored dark aluminum 77.703, as did the engine cylinders. I then painted the inner portions of the cowling with interior green. And then it was time to put on the canopy. Now things start to get fun. The gear housing was coated in game color squid pink 72.013. And just because I could, I slapped on one of the decals from the sheet that I'll be using. I'll get into the quality of the decals in a bit, but it came from the High Q Parts SKR decal set. Some microsol was applied to get it to lay right, and then the cowling could go on and we can move on to the spray booth. Which really is less of a booth and more of two cardboard boxes nested into each other and a fan blowing anything that doesn't catch out of the open window, but I digress. Model color black was sprayed along every panel line and wherever shadows may naturally gather, such as where two surfaces meet at a sharp angle. I opted to go for my traditional pre-shading of panel lines. Because these are raised panel lines though, I knew I would not be able to rely on washes later to help bring them out. So I'm being a little more accurate and a little more clean with my lines compared to how I usually approach it. The bottom of the plane got a coat of Model Air Insignia White 71.279. Now with pre-shading, it's imperative that you do not go too heavy-handed with the paint so that the shadows can still show through the paint, and it's doubly so here with these panel lines. Masking was then applied to achieve the classic tritone patterning present on Corsairs. Then the same squid pink from earlier was applied in place of the intermediate blue. So that means on the bottom of the folding portion of the wings, the tail stabilizers, and on the side of the fuselage. Now, the demarcation lines on the sides, those are just eyeballed. I think the softer line looks better in the end than having that clean, sharp line. In place of the sea gloss blue, I grabbed Model Color Magenta Fluorescent 70.735. I was hoping for this hot, vibrant, electric pink color, but, well, as you can see here, it did not cover worth a darn. I sprayed significantly more than I should have in the attempt. Rather than continuing and possibly causing an issue, I looked through my paints to see if I had an alternative. I think this paint is some kind of transparent paint, almost like a candy coat, so I figured I could lay something red, or at least reddish, down, and the pink would pull the color to what I was wanting. Model Color Vermilion 70.909 was chosen for this and applied even lighter. At this point, I was really starting to get worried that the pre-shading was not going to show through. Once dried, I went back and applied a few light coats of the magenta. I'm not really certain how or why, but instead of going more pink, it pulled the slight orange tone of the vermilion into this rich red. Wasn't my intention, but the more I look at it, the more I love it. I even applied a little of the magenta over the squid pink to pull it more in line with the deeper red. The masking was removed and it was time to paint in the details, like the spinner, which received a coat of squid pink. Black was applied to the props, as well as the tires. The tire hubcaps, landing gear struts, and exhaust pipes were all painted with dark aluminum. And of course, the prop blades were tipped with Model Air Yellow, 71.078. Everything was allowed to dry, and then a coat of Mr. Super Clear gloss varnish was sprayed over everything to prep the model for decals. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these decals are a third-party aftermarket set from HiQ Parts. They mainly do upgrade parts for Gundam and other sci-fi mecha kits, but they have all sorts of decal sheets. I picked out this Sakura Blossom sheet thinking the plane was going to be more pink. However, I still think it fits well enough with the red. Insofar as the decals go, these were pretty good. Better than I was expecting, to be honest. And when they set down, they gripped nice and tight, so I didn't have to worry so much about them shifting as I squeezed the water out from under them with a cotton bud. And if they did shift, or if you put them in the wrong place, all you needed to do was lift one corner and let water underneath, and they'd pop right back up for you to readjust. I chose a number of designs from the sheet, primarily Sakura blossoms that I could replace roundels with, as well as these caution lines for use as do not step stencils. And using these small blossoms as kill counters made me smile a little as well. Now, because everything was over raised panel lines, each and every decal was given some microsol to help the decal lay over them. Once happy with how they all laid, it was time to attach the prop. Now, just because there was raised panel lines doesn't mean I didn't have a use for a panel liner. Because the only recessed panel lines represented actual gaps in the aircraft, such as where the wings folded, I had no issues using black Tamiya panel line accent color. This was run along every recessed panel line, or maybe gap is more accurate. Either way, the wash was allowed to set for a little while before having the excess wiped away with a cotton bud damped with Artist's White Spirit. I like to wipe in the direction of either airflow or gravity so any streaking can be easily seen as faux weathering. The model was then hit with a dull coat varnish, the canopy mask was removed, and we can call this one done. And there we go, a red and pink Corsair from Hasegawa in 1/72nd scale. Now, I appreciate you sticking through the video with me. I know this was a silly and ridiculous build, but I had a ton of fun, and I am absolutely in love with how this turned out, even with the issue with the pink. The kit itself was okay. I can't say I'll go out of my way to grab another one of these, but at the same time, if one found its way into my stash, I wouldn't exactly be upset about that either. Now, I'm sure a few have spotted some cat fur in these close-ups. That's because it actually took almost 3 days for the paint to fully dry. I believe this was due to how much of that pink I actually sprayed on the kit. It was significantly more than this video made it seem. But that's okay though, it's not like this was going to be winning any awards or anything. Thank you Cali Bear and all of my starter set patrons. Your support is invaluable and keeps this channel going. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my video, make sure to subscribe and turn on that bell so you can catch every upload. I've got some standard kits on the way, along with a few silly builds like this. Don't want to wait until the next upload? How about checking out one of these videos here? Regardless everyone, remember to stay safe and keep modeling.